I am the Decay Echo, and this is your invitation to witness the unfolding of a narrative that refuses to fade into the silence of oblivion, a narrative as eternal as the whispers of decay. Let the journey begin, and may your curiosity be as relentless as the march of time. Now, traveler, let's venture onward to discover myths, legends, facts, and forgotten history.
Welcome to part 1 of our two-part exploration into the sky's strangest outbursts, the most anomalous weather events in U.S. history, from raining creatures to firestorms and temperature drops that defy logic. This episode unearths nature's most unpredictable moments, those rare times when the weather didn't just misbehave, it broke all the rules. Buckle in as we uncover real stories of atmospheric chaos that left scientists stunned and entire towns forever changed. This is not your average forecast, this is the storm you never saw coming. Let's step into the eye of the anomaly. 1816, the year without a summer. One of the most iconic and anomalous weather events in U.S. history was the so-called year without a summer of 1816. The cause of this event is well known: a massive volcanic eruption of Mti Tambora on Sumbawa Island, Indonesia, culminating on April 10, 1815. This was the greatest volcanic eruption on Earth of at least the past 1,700 years at the time, and since. The eruption adversely affected the global climate for years. Among other events, it led to near-famine conditions in Ireland and abnormally cool summers across much of the Northern Hemisphere. The summer of 1816 was the coolest, when it is estimated that the global mean temperature cooled 0.70 degrees to 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit below the average for that decade. In the US, this was manifested most notably by a cold and snowy spring and summer in, at least, New England and eastern Canada, hence the year without a summer moniker. On June 6, accumulating snow was observed as far south as the Catskills in New York, where 1 inch was reported, and the highlands of central and northwest Pennsylvania. Snowflakes were seen at sea level as far south as 10 miles north of Tidewater on the Hudson River above New York City. A heavier snow event followed on the night of June 7 to 8, with the deepest accumulations reported in the mountains of Vermont, where drifts of 12 to 18 inch were observed. Quebec City in Canada reported 12 inch on level with drifts up to 2 feet deep. Scattered frosts continued through July and August, ruining many farmers' crops. It should be noted, however, that this event may have been a bit exaggerated in terms of it truly being a year without summer. A citizen observer in Waltham, Massachusetts, noted in his weather diary that he witnessed some snow on June 6 to 8 and a temperature as low as 33 degrees at sunrise on the 10, but by June 23 and 24 the temperature peaked at 99 degrees and 98 degrees respectively, which would be unusual heat for any year at this location assuming the gentleman's thermometer was accurate. June snowfall has occurred in the eastern U.S. on other occasions as well. On June 11, 1842, widespread snow fell over northern New York and New England, and snowflakes were observed in Cleveland, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, and even Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a low-elevation site within the state. Accumulations of 10 inch to 12 were common in Vermont, so this event was actually more extreme than the more famous snow of June 1816. Nevertheless, the event of 1816 remains iconic in the annals of American history and was part of a global phenomenon rather than a regional anomaly. 1853, the Great Ball Lightning Storm of Bar Harbor. In an event that strains credulity, the seaside town of Bar Harbor, known as Eden at the time, on Empty Desert Island, Maine, experienced a weather event on the night of February 13, 1853 so bizarre as to recall something from the pages of a Stephen King novel. The storm and ball lightning event was recounted by eyewitnesses to the Ellsworth Herald newspaper, Hancock County, Maine, in several issues between February 18 and March 4 that year. The wind that day, February 13, had been from the NE accompanied with snow, with a temperature of from 15 to 20 degrees above zero. At 6 p.m. the wind had increased to a heavy gale, and at 7 p.m. ceased to blow, and flashes of vivid lightning commenced. In a few minutes more thunder was heard in the NW, and at 8:30 p.m. the scene was grand and awful beyond description. The lightning was of a purple color, and sometimes appeared like balls of fire, coming through windows and doors and down chimneys, while the houses trembled and shook to their very foundations. A great many people were slightly injured. Some were struck in the feet, some in the eye, while others were electrized, sick, some powerfully and some slightly. But what was very singular, not a person was killed or seriously injured, nor a building damaged, but a cluster of trees within a few rods of two dwelling houses was not thus fortunate. The electric fluid came down among them, taking them out by the roots, with stones and earth, and throwing all in every direction. Some were left hanging by their roots from the tops of adjacent standing trees, roots up, tops down. The lightning, after entering the earth to a depth of several feet and for a space some 8 to 10 feet in diameter, diverged into 4 different directions. One course which it took led through open land, making a chasm to the depth of several feet, and continued its march unobstructed by solid, frozen ground or any other substance, to the distance of 370 feet, lifting, overturning and throwing out chunks of frozen earth, some of which were 10 or 11 feet wide, and hurling some distance, rocks, stones and roots. It really seemed God's mercy is manifested in sparing our lives amidst such danger and destruction. There is no question that a ferocious blizzard accompanied by intense lightning affected much of down East Maine that night. 7 inches of snow fell in Ellsworth, and inhabitants there noted exceedingly vivid lightning, unlike anything they had ever witnessed. It is hard to conceive of such a hoax being perpetrated by an entire island's population. Unfortunately, we have no photographic evidence to confirm the impacts described, and there are no official weather observations from the area at this early date. Ball lightning is still a mysterious phenomenon being actively researched. One fascinating study in 2010 found that the experience of seeing ball lightning may at least in some cases be a hallucination induced by the magnetic fields associated with regular lightning. The first scientific confirmation of ball lightning was made in 2014. 1862, the California flood and storms of January. California's most extensive flood in modern records inundated the entire Central Valley after a seemingly never-ending series of powerful Pacific storms that began in late December 1861 and continued with few breaks until early February 1862. The storms were anomalous not just for their intensity and persistence but also because of the unusual temperature patterns that accompanied them. The first rain of the 1861 to 1862 season occurred on November 10, according to San Francisco records. By the end of November 4.10 inch of rain had fallen, well above the average of 3.20. The first half of December brought an additional 3.27 inch, and then the rains began in earnest on December 23. From that point to January 22, an astonishing 29.28 inch of rain was measured in the city. Keep in mind that the average annual rainfall in downtown San Francisco is just 23.65 inch. An additional 1.35 inch fell the last week of January, resulting in a calendar month total of 24.36 in January, the wettest month on record, and a 33.90 total for December-January. February went on to produce another 7.53 inch, mostly in the first week of the month. Sacramento measured 23.68 inch during the 2-month period of December-January, annual average is 19.87, and in San Diego 8.76 of rain fell, annual average 10.77. Estimates of up to 35 inch of rain were reported from the Los Angeles area, annual average 15.14 at downtown. In the Sierra Nevada foothills, truly extraordinary amounts of precipitation were reported, including 102 inch of rain and melted snow in the mining town of Sonora over the 2-month December-January period. Flooding that had begun during the December deluges increased in scope and intensity throughout January. Eventually, by mid-January, the capital city of Sacramento was inundated by 10 feet of water, forcing the new governor to travel to his inauguration in a rowboat. It is unclear how many lives were lost. The New York Times published rumors emanating from San Francisco's Chinatown that 1,000 Chinese miners and other laborers perished in the vicinity of Yuba when their makeshift town on a bar of the Yuba River was washed away. One strange meteorological aspect of the event was the wild swings of temperature that occurred during both December and January. Although the only actual temperature record we have was from a resident of San Francisco, Thomas Tennant, we know from the constant accumulation and subsequent melting of the Sierra snowpack that some of the storms were very warm and some very cold. Snow melted during some storms at altitudes as high as 8,000 feet, and yet snow fell at near sea level in Sacramento during other storms. 0.75 inch of snow was actually reported in Sacramento itself on January 29. In San Francisco, Mr. Tennant recorded 9 days with below freezing temperatures in January alone, including a 22 degrees reading on January 28, a full 5 degrees colder than any temperature ever measured in the modern era of the city. Record cold weather in the Bay Area has historically been associated with dry weather. Massive runoff from the mountains during the warm storms filled the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys from the foothills of the Sierra in the east to the coastal hills in the west. A giant lake 250 to 300 miles long and 20 miles wide formed, flooding some 5,000 to 6,000 square miles of what is now some of the most valuable agricultural land in the world and home to about 2 million people. Although El Niño winters tend to be wetter than normal across California, the 1861 to 1862 event may not have occurred during an El Niño year, according to research done at Oregon State University by climatologists Victor Neal and William Quinn. Their analysis indicates a polar jet swept down to central California in December and then fluctuated north and south over the Pacific Northwest and California, for a 2-month period, interacting with a persistent Alaskan low that bowled one storm after another into California. Nevertheless, one must assume, given the prodigious rainfall amounts, that a subtropical stream of moisture must have been entrained into at least some of these systems, manifested as one or more atmospheric rivers. Regardless, California has not experienced such a similarly persistent weather pattern since 1862. 1895, the Great Gulf Coast Snowstorm of February. What is likely the most anomalous snowstorm in U.S. records occurred on February 14 to 16, 1895, when up to 2 feet of snow accumulated along the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana. The Louisiana Weather Journal published this statement. Within a week after one of the most severe cold waves ever experienced in Louisiana, the central and southern portions of the state were given a second record breaker in the form of snowfall that exceeded any on record of former years, and even the oldest inhabitant was nonplussed in trying to rake up some winter in the long ago when anything like such a mantle had decked the cane and rice fields and orange groves. But it was no use, there never had been such a snowfall in the memory of man. And detailed reports from all of South Louisiana only emphasized the fact that something unprecedented in the annals of the climatology of the state had occurred. We can now add, some 123 years later, that nothing comparable to this event has yet to manifest itself again. In the town of Rain, near Lafayette and only 35 miles from the Gulf Coast, the 24-inch of snow, as measured on level ground, so the actual snowfall amount was likely higher, remains the greatest snow depth ever reported in either Texas or Louisiana. Lake Charles received 22-inch, Baton Rouge 12, and New Orleans 8 to 10, in each case their greatest snowfalls on record. In Texas the event was, if possible, even more anomalous. 20-inch of snow on level was measured in Houston, 15.4, in Galveston at Tidewater, 18, at Brazoria near the coast 50 miles southwest of Galveston, and 5.0-6.0 at Brownsville on the Gulf Coast border with Mexico. Snow flurries were even reported in Tampico, Mexico, located at a latitude of 22.18 degrees north, actually below the Tropic of Cancer, 250 miles south of Brownsville and right on the Gulf Coast. This remains the most southerly sea level snowfall ever observed in the Western Hemisphere. Other snow totals from Texas reported in the USWB Monthly Bulletin of the Texas Weather Service included 20-inch at Columbia, Orange, and Stafford, and 12.0 at Victoria. The heaviest snowfall was confined mostly to the coastal regions, as evidenced by accumulations of only 2.0 inch in Laredo and 3.5 in College Station. The USWB Bulletin does not mention how much snow fell in Corpus Christi, but 0.43 inch of liquid precipitation fell on February 14 with a max/minimum temperature range of 30°/26. If we assume a typical snow-to-liquid ratio of around 10:1, then roughly 4 inch to 5 fell there, which may have been the city's greatest snowfall on record. 5.0 accumulated on January 28 to 29, 1897. Heavy snowfall progressed east along the Gulf Coast through western Florida into the next day, February 15. The USWB monthly report of the Mississippi Weather Service mentioned many stations reporting it the heaviest fall to be known for a long number of years. No specific totals were mentioned, but the melted precipitation totals of 0.62 inch at Biloxi and 0.80 at Moss Point with below freezing temperatures on February 15 indicate that perhaps as much as 8 accumulated along the coastal areas. In Alabama, the Alabama Weather Review mentioned that the storm on February 15 deposited a few inches in the southern portions of the state to a foot deep in the northern portions. This would indicate that the low-pressure system in the Gulf of Mexico responsible for the storm tracked northeastward, and thus the heaviest snow pushed northward by the time it reached Alabama. That being said, virtually all the stations in Florida from the Panhandle to Jacksonville reported snowfall. 2 inches of snow was measured in Tallahassee before the snow changed to rain, according to the USWB report of the Florida Weather Service. The same report mentioned that snow fell in Tampa, and, according to newspaper reports, the snow in Pensacola was deep enough to permit the people of that city to ride in sleighs. In Georgia, 5 inches of snow fell in Albany, which would surpass its modern record of 3.0, observed on February 10, 1973. 5 inches was also measured at Darien, near the Atlantic coast south of Savannah. 1936. Coldest February to hottest July in U.S. history. No year in U.S. weather records was more extreme temperature-wise than that of 1936. Nationally, February was the coldest such on record and July the hottest such, since at least 1895. Both those records stand today, more than 80 years later. The summer of 1936, June-August, remains the warmest in U.S. records, and the winter of 1935 to 1936, December-February, is still the coldest winter on record for the Northern Plains states and second coldest winter for the entire contiguous U.S. Nowhere were the extremes more pronounced than in the Dakotas. In North Dakota, the state's all-time coldest temperature of -60 degrees was observed at Parshall on February 15, while its hottest reading on record, 121 degrees Fahrenheit, occurred on July 6 in Steele. Likewise, South Dakota went from a state all-time low of -58 degrees at McIntosh on February 17 to an all-time high of 120 degrees at Gan Valley on July 5, the latter record has since been tied. What was also extraordinary for both the cold waves and heat waves of 1936 were how persistent they were. Langdon, North Dakota, was the epicenter of the cold. It remained below freezing, day and night, for 92 consecutive days, from November 30 through February 29, and below 0 degrees for 41 consecutive days, January 11 through February 20. The latter was a record for any location in the contiguous U.S. Langdon's warmest February temperature was a frigid 15 degrees, Bismarck's was just 23 degrees, and the hamlet of Amenia managed a monthly high of only 10 degrees during January, another contiguous national record for coldest monthly maximum. Turtle Lake, also in North Dakota, averaged -19.4 degrees for the month of February, the coldest monthly mean in U.S. records outside of Alaska. Just a short 5 months later, the hottest summer and most intense heat waves on record engulfed much of the U.S., with the Dakotas yet again at the epicenter of the most extreme temperature anomalies. 1943, the Black Hills temperature antics of January 22, 1943. One of the strangest weather events in U.S. history took place in the Black Hills region of western South Dakota on January 23, 1943, after an inversion formed over the area, trapping cold air in the valleys of the Black Hills. Strong but erratic surface winds scoured the cold air temporarily out of the valleys, resulting in a battle between the cold and warm air over the course of the day. This resulted in some extraordinary swings in temperature, the most extreme of such being a 49 degrees Fahrenheit rise of temperature in just 2 minutes in Spearfish between 7:30 a.m. and 7:32 a.m. By 9 a.m., the temperature had risen gradually to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, when it suddenly dropped again to -4 degrees Fahrenheit just 27 minutes later. The town of Lead, also in the Black Hills, experienced such a shocking change of temperature that plate glass windows reportedly cracked. At one point, the town of Deadwood, in a canyon 600 feet lower than Lead, but only 2 miles away, had a temperature of -16 degrees Fahrenheit, while at the same time it was 52 degrees Fahrenheit in lead. Wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour were whipping through the region. Motorists had to pull off the roads, as their windshields would suddenly frost over as they drove from a warm pocket to a cold one. Rapid City, in the foothills east of the Black Hills, also experienced shocking changes of temperature as measured in the thermograph trace at the downtown U.S. Weather Bureau, USWB, Weather Office. Needless to say, the temperature excursions in the Black Hills that day are the most extreme observed and measured anywhere in the U.S., and perhaps the world, in terms of multiple rapid changes over short periods. It's curious that something like this has not since occurred again, at least to this degree, anywhere in the U.S., marking this event as one of the most anomalous in U.S. weather history. And that wraps part 1 of our descent into America's most anomalous weather events. But this was just the calm before the storm. In part 2, we track the bizarre and the extreme from coast to coast, record-shattering cold snaps in the Midwest, firestorms in the West, freak hailstorms in the South, and eerie sky anomalies over the Northeast. From 1942 to 2024, these regional outbursts didn't just disrupt, they defied all logic. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the skies above your state may have more secrets to share.
And so, our descent comes to a pause. But remember, the crypt holds secrets yet unspoken, a forgotten chronicle awaits, one that will twist our understanding of history even further. I am the Decay Echo, and until our next journey, let the whispers of the past guide you deeper into the shadows.